Hi everyone, my name is Stephen Bailey, and this presentation is designed to acclimate a manager preparing for work in France. This was for my class entitled Leading Across Cultures. As a young student, my knowledge of France was always secondary to what I knew of England. In my American history classes, I learned of America's Declaration of Freedom written to England and how the British fought against the United States. In my upper grades, I learned of Germany and the rest of the Axis powers, but little attention was ever given to the country of France. I knew of the beaches of Normandy and the Eiffel Tower, but little about the French-Indian War. I'd heard of leaders like Napoleon, but my teachers never went into much detail, and in high school I decided to take a French class to familiarize myself with the French language and the French culture. I learned that France had once been a powerful ally for the United States, and the American alliance with the French had always provided an established trading partner and additional military force. As a matter of fact, without the assistance from the French, it is unlikely that the United States would have even won the Revolutionary War. It's because of my understanding of the role of France in American history that I decided to choose France and compare its culture with that of America. France is located in Western Europe. It borders the Bay of Biscay and the English Channel. It's right in between Belgium and Spain, just southwest of the UK, bordering the Mediterranean Sea between Italy and Spain. France's government is classified as a republic, which means it's a state ruled by representatives of its citizen body. Modern republics are founded on the idea that sovereignty rests within the people. Those who are included and excluded from this category of the country have varied across history. Appointed by the president of the republic or the head of state, the prime minister is the actual head of the French government. He directs the actions of the government and in principle sets out the essential political guidelines which, except in the case of cohabitation, are those of the president of the republic. He must ensure that the coordination of government action prevents different ministers from taking contradictory initiatives through this arbitration. He is not necessarily the hierarchical superior of the other ministers. He may never force them to take a decision which they are unwilling to take even responsibility for, but he may suggest their dismissal to the president in the event of a serious misconduct. In terms of France's ethnic groups, most of the population holds French citizenship, and most of the citizens are actually from French ancestry. There's also a small number of Germans, Armenians, Gypsies, Russians, Poles, and others. The largest resident alien groups in France are Algerians, Portuguese, Moroccans, Italians, Spaniards, Tunisians, and Turks. The main religion in France is Roman Catholicism. As just a few years ago, it was estimated that over 80% of the country's residents come from this religious background. Although Roman Catholicism is the dominant religion in France, there's also a number of people who practice other religions. Approximately 2% of the French population are Protestant and 7 to 8% are practicing Muslims. France is also home to a handful who are Jewish or identify with a different faith. Only about 4% of the population claims no religious preference, a statistic that shows just how important religion is to the French culture. As I observed the data found in the Globe Project Dimension Study, I found that even though the United States scored higher than France on several value dimensions, they scored lower in practice. Even though the United States said that they valued gender egalitarianism and in-group collectivism and rated higher than France in the value category of each of these dimensions, they scored lower in practice. Gender egalitarianism is the degree to which a society minimizes gender inequality. This can be explained practically in the male to female ratios at businesses and how much men earn on average compared with women within the same company. In-group collectivism is the degree to which individuals express pride, loyalty, and cohesiveness in their organizations or families. In-group collectivism can practically be explained by how much employees are involved in work-related activities and retention rate at a particular organization. The United States scored higher in value than France in each of these dimensions, but scored lower in practice. France produced similar results, but for different dimensions. For example, France scored higher in value than the United States in humane orientation, which is the degree to which an organization or collective encourages and rewards individuals for being fair, altruistic, generous, caring, and kind to others. And institutional collectivism, which is the degree to which an organization or society, their institutional practices encourage and reward collective distribution of resources and collective action. Although they scored higher in value, they scored lower in practice. Why is this the case? Why do some countries score higher in value but lower in practice? Common sense would say that countries would practice what they actually value, but this is not always the case. From my perspective, it seems that societies, they want to expect the best of themselves. Americans want to believe that they value each gender equally, But when it comes to actual practice, the United States falls short of even its own expectations. The French want to believe that they reward individuals for being fair, generous, and kind, or humane orientation. But when it comes to practice, this is not always the case. Additionally, the United States scored higher than France in assertiveness, which is the degree to which individuals are assertive, confrontational, and aggressive in their relationships with other people. The French are way more likely to have a laid-back attitude. There's actually a French term that describes this mindset, which is laissez-faire, and this means that it's a philosophy or practice that's characterized by a usually deliberate abstention from direction or interference, especially with individual freedom of choice and action. Americans are more likely to try to force things to happen, while the French are more likely to let things happen. The United States also scored higher than France in future orientation, which is the extent to which individuals engage in future-oriented behaviors such as delayed gratification, planning, and investing in the future. This could affect how employees view promotion and advancement in the workplace. An American may be more willing to be patient than a French employee in waiting to advance. This patience can also be correlated to performance orientation, which is the degree to which a collective encourages and rewards group members for performance, improvement, and excellence. In performance orientation, the United States scored higher than France, as Americans are more likely to reward individuals on their performance than simply reward an entire group or no one at all. It appears that because Americans are more likely to be rewarded for their individual efforts, they tend to put a lot more effort into their work than the French. In uncertainty avoidance, which is the extent to which a society, organization, or group relies on social norms, rules, and procedures to alleviate unpredictability of future events, France scored higher than the United States. This leaning could have an effect on the workplace environment because the French are more likely to be structured in their business models to avoid or sustain unpredictability. Americans may be more likely to have a figured out disposition. This means that Americans are more likely to be creative in their business endeavors, while the French may look more towards past results to determine future success. In power distance, which is the extent to which the community accepts and endorses authority, power difference, and status privileges, the United States and France scored fairly the same. Knowing these results, communication, motivation, and teamwork in the workplace would certainly be affected. For someone working in the United States, it would be important to communicate gender equality when discussing the topic, but the expectation that gender equality is actually occurring should be hesitant. This difference in value and in practice could also have an effect on teamwork. A woman may hear that she is being valued within the workplace, but she could find out that she doesn't make as much money as her peers. If this were the case, anyone in this situation would find it difficult to feel that they are valued and a part of the team. Similarly, if someone took a new job in France, they would hear that individuals were valued by how fair and generous they are, but this may not actually be the case. If an employee is always being generous to those around him or her, they may not actually receive very much reward. This employee may find it difficult to remain motivated to help others if the society around him or her is not encouraging that behavior in practice. Studying Globe's 9 practice dimension model would be beneficial in my office in particular because my colleagues come from a wide variety of social backgrounds. I have colleagues that are first-generation Americans as well as those that are on their way to becoming one. Additionally, despite the fact that everyone is a citizen or at least on that track, each colleague holds distinctly different beliefs. It would be interesting to see how those that I work with would score. Taking the Globe 9 Practice Dimensions survey and sharing my results with other coworkers would give my peers and I a better understanding of our own cultural backgrounds and how this relates with one another. By gaining a better understanding of how others view the work environment, conflicts could be diffused before they even start, and employees would give a greater appreciation for the differences in the office personalities. The Bible is not silent on the issue of cultural differences. There are several occurrences in Scripture where two people groups are often in disagreement. Most notably, it always seems to be the Jews and the Gentiles. The Apostle Paul, in reference to these two groups, states this in Ephesians 2, verses 14 through 16 in the New International Version. He says, "For he," referring to Jesus himself, "is our peace, who has made the two groups one and has destroyed the barrier, the dividing wall of hostility, by setting aside in the flesh the law with its commands and regulations. His purpose was to create in himself one new humanity out of the two, thus making peace, and in one body to reconcile both of them to God through the cross, by which he put to death their hostility." In this passage, Jesus is talking about Because he died for all, there can be unity between two conflicting people groups. Additionally, Jesus addresses the issue of hostility between the Pharisees and the non-believers in the calling of Matthew the tax collector in the book of Matthew chapter 9 verses 9 through 12, also in the New International Version. It reads this: As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me," he told him, and Matthew got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came up and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked the disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus replied, "It's not the healthy who need a doctor, but instead the sick." Once again, Jesus approaches this issue of hostility between two different groups of people, and he attempts to bring them together and unite them by saying that I'm here not just for the believer, but for the unbeliever as well. In summary, Globe's 9 practice dimensions are certainly not exhaustive. There continues to be additional research that is being presented. While Globe's 9 practice dimensions are not the final authority on comparing cultures, it certainly presents a valid foundation for understanding the differences between the French and Americans. Both of these countries do not widely differ on their practices or values, but even the small differences could prove to be challenging in the workplace. In any international company, it would be beneficial for employees to go through additional training, not just for employees that are traveling to foreign countries for employment, but also for national employees that will be working with international employees. By learning about another person's culture, one can begin to respect each other's differences and work towards creating a work environment that respects everyone. I want to thank you so much for watching this video, and hopefully you learned a little bit about American culture and how it interacts with French culture. I hope that after viewing this video, you would begin to understand even just a little bit better of what it would be like to be a manager working in a foreign culture or country such as France.